Good morning, everybody. We're going to kick off in about 3 or 4 minutes. Thank you for attending today. See a few of you getting on a little early. Hopefully, this is not your 10,000th webinar of the day. I'm feeling this one will be exciting. So stand by. We'll probably kick off right around 9 o'clock. Morning, everybody. We'll kick it off in about 2 minutes. Just do a real quick sound check. Ricky, Whitmer, Catherine, Javi, can you guys hear me? If you could throw it into the chat box just to make sure that the audio is good to go.
First big webinar, 60 people.
Oh, geez, good.
Good morning. We're going to kick off in 1 minute. Well, it is 9 o'clock on the dot, it looks like. So we're going to start this off. I'd like to start off by thanking everybody for attending. Everybody on the call is muted, so if you have any questions, please type them into the question box, and we'll reply at a break or when there's a good opportunity. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everybody for taking the time to get on the call with us today, and hope everyone is safe and well in the new world order that we have these days, and not going too crazy staring at the four walls in your house. It's trying times, but we're making the best of it. And so just some quick housekeeping things. If you have any questions, please type them in, and then we'll kick it off. But, you know, from the Western family and from the Lutron family, we would really like to thank all of you guys for your business and everything that you do for us on a daily basis. If there are any custom webinars that you'd like us to develop for you or for your company, please let us know. We're here to help you guys out. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Gasper for working to put together this presentation for us today, and we'll make a recording of this available on our website afterwards in case you want to catch up on it. We'll also, if we didn't get your certification numbers, we'll reach out and get those as well. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce, I'm Jim Reifsnyder, by the way. I don't think I introduced myself. One of the principals at Western. I work primarily on the residential side of the business. Western Lighting and Energy Controls. We're here for your lighting needs as well as your controls needs, so let us know how we can help you. And I'll introduce a man who mostly needs no introduction, but a few new faces on the call, but Mr. Mark Gasper of Lutron Electronics. Mark?
All right, can everybody see me, hear me?
Mark Gasper is not in a white shirt, everybody. This is worth the price of admission by itself.
Well, thank you, Jim, first of all, for hosting Lutron and this webinar. Echoing Jim's thoughts, I hope everybody's well, everybody's family's doing well, everybody's co-workers, tough times here. And, you know, at myself and at Lutron, we've decided, you know, we're not going to be the victims of this COVID issue. We're going to take this time to learn new skills, to get back to the basics, and hopefully when this is over in the next month or two, that we come out stronger, you know, better trained and more able to lead our company and lead ourselves and lead our families into the new frontier. So just a real brief history on myself. You know, when I have these presentations, I always like to know, you know, where the speaker's coming from, what his experience is. So I graduated from Marquette University in the mid-1980s, went to work for a lighting company in Cleveland, which is, you know, my kind of hometown there, called Timely Lighting. They did, you know, cheap builder light fixtures. So if you're doing cheap tract homes or cheap apartments or, you know, Indian reservations or anything where you know, you just wanted the lowest cost fixtures that did the job, that was Timely Lighting. I left them after a couple of years and went to American Lantern, which was a move up in the world. They had very elegant brass handmade lanterns. They were unfortunately torpedoed with the inrush of imports from China and the Asian and Oriental areas. They kind of decimated that brass lantern business in the early 90s. From there, I made my big leap into Lightolier, which is where I first learned about actual science of lighting. You know, what is a foot candle? What is a beam angle? How does lighting really work? Some of the concepts that we're going to cover in today's webinar. And after 4 or 5 years at Lightolier, I transferred over to Lutron, where I'm currently been for 20 plus years. I fell in love with the control of lighting more than the lights itself. And interesting enough, for those of you who know, that Lutron in the last 2 years or so has gotten back into the fixture business. So Lutron now has addressable fixtures with the red, green, blue, and white color spectrum, you know, the abilities of giving you the color temperature and the experience of outdoor lighting inside your homes and offices. So that's kind of where I've been, what my history is. You know, I think that kind of shades how the presentation may go and the examples I may use. You know, we'll just from here start on the presentation. So hope you enjoy it. I think this is one of the best CEUs, in fact, that Lutron has, and we have many, because most of our CEUs, or a lot of many ways, you get kind of general principles. You're not that actively involved in it. There's not a whole lot of learning going on. But this one, in my opinion, is almost like a mini college course. So we're going to dive down deep into, you know, the metrics of light. We're going to talk about fixtures, how to select fixtures, what are some lighting strategies, how do you position lights around the room, what spacings do you need, you know, what's important to look for in a light fixture. So I think this is a very good course, and I'm happy to be sharing it with you today. So I'm going to switch out of you looking at me and look at the PowerPoint, and we're going to dive right in. Hopefully we're going to dive right in. There we go. So if you're an interior designer or an architect and you're looking for CEU official credits, we will send you this nice little lovely PDF on at least my left-hand side. I'm not sure if it's your left-hand side, but this will come to you within 3 or 4 days from Lutron, just verifying that you are on this call. So, and if you wanted just to have it, even if you're not an interior designer or an architect, maybe you wanted to show your boss that you did something while you were at home, or if you're a student, you want it for your files for further employment opportunities. Again, if you submit the information we're going to ask for on the next screen, this will be sent to you. So the program is applications for lighting design. What's in the red box is what we need from you. So get that to either Western, who started this webinar, or you've got my email there. So we need your basic information, your name, your email, your phone number, company name, and then if you are a member of AIA or IDCEC, that's the Interior Design Coalition, get that information to us. And if you're not, again, if you're not a member of AIA or IDCEC and still want a copy of the confirmation that you attended the training, then just say so and we'll send you out the PDF. So below is all the relevant information on what the course numbers are, what the approval codes are. If you're on your phone or on your computer, you can simply do, take out your phone and do a screenshot of this, or do a screenshot on your computer to have it. The caveat is if you want Lutron to file for this, I need to get the information into them within 48 hours. So I need to get it from you guys within 24 or 36 for me to wrap it all together and send it in for official credit. All right, let's move on into the presentation. Where to begin? Well, you got to begin at the beginning, right? That's always the good place to start. So, one of my earlier bosses said there's no way that you can control something until you learn how to measure it. So you don't know how hot it is until you know what, a degree of temperature is. You don't know how much liquid you need for this recipe you're going to make until you know what a cup or a tablespoon is. It's hard to judge how far you've gone until you understand what a foot or a meter or a mile or any kind of that is. Somebody sets the basic standard. Somebody decided what an inch was. Somebody decided what a meter was. And if you're going to talk about lighting, same thing. If you're going to measure the quantity of lighting, you've got to start with something. What is the basic unit of measurement, and that is what we call a lumen. So a lumen is a theoretical candle in a 1 square meter space, how much light it emits. Why I say it's a theoretical candle, as you can probably guess, candles vary. How thick the wick is, what is the wick made of, what is the wax made of. So candles do vary, but somebody has to say this is our theoretical candle, and this is the amount of light that a candle, our theoretical candle, is putting out. So that's what we call a lumen, and that is kind of the bedrock of understanding lighting and measuring lighting and knowing, how much quantity you're getting. All right, the second major thing to talk about is a foot candle. Now, the reason I'm bringing these up is if you think about any specialty, whether you're a plumber or an electrician or an artist or a sports star, every endeavor where there's a specialty kind of develops its own unique terminology. One of my hobbies, which I unfortunately can't play right now, is tennis. So if you're familiar with tennis, you need to know what a double fault is, what a let serve is, what a volley is, what a rally is. It has developed its own terminology. And that's the same thing with lighting. Same thing, again, if you're a specialist or consider yourself a specialist in any field, I'm sure there's a set terminology you have to pick on. So we talked about lumen. The second most important concept in lighting is the foot candle. So the foot candle is the amount of light that hits an object. So once again, the standard is that theoretical candle that's 1 foot. We're looking at a surface 1 foot from that candle. How much light is that putting on that surface? Now, one of the first things that I had trouble with, and you may if you're new to the lighting business, is that sometimes manufacturers and designers and architects kind of talk past each other. Because as a lighting manufacturer, all you're ever going to talk about is lumens. How much light does this light source, produce? 800 lumens, 900 lumens, 1,000, 1,200. A light fixture company can never really tell you how much light is going to arrive on that surface that you want to see. Why? Because there's distance. I could take that same 600 watt lumen fixture. If it's 3 feet from me, I'm going to get a lot of light. If it's 30 feet from me, I'm not going to get very much, right? And then there's other things that we'll talk about in the next slide that kind of reduce or influence how much light that person's going to actually see. But the first two concepts are the lumen, which is how much light that the fixture puts out. The second one is foot candle, which is the amount of light that actually hits the surface that you're looking at. So what are those other variables? Well, the first one, as you see in the picture there, you've got your lumen. Let's say it's putting out 1,000 lumens, just for example. So the first one is how far is that light away? The second thing you'll notice is that it reflects off of a surface, right? I mean, there's a reason that human beings don't have eyes on the top of their heads, because you'd go blind. It's very uncomfortable in almost every circumstance to look directly at a light. If you think about it, even though the sun's up there, we rarely look directly at it. What we see is the light from the sun reflecting off oceans, reflecting off buildings, reflecting off land, reflecting off whatever, trees, shrubbery. Same thing in a room, right? Do you ever go under a downlight and look directly up into it? I don't think so, not unless you're want some pain in your eye. You're looking at the light that's reflected off the walls, off the floor, off the, whatever surfaces are in there. That's how the light is actually getting to your eye. So that's why we can't completely go by what the fixture is putting out, because there's the distance from the fixture to where you are. The light is probably going to hit walls. I think it's kind of intuitive knowledge, but it bears stating that if you have light white walls or off-white walls, they're going to reflect a lot more light than if you paint that room black or purple or something like that. It's going to absorb 30-40% of the light before it reflects back to you. So you'll get less light. If you're worried about light in a room, have a white walls. Right? If you put black or dark walls in there, it's going to absorb a lot of light. And then once again, how far is that surface from where you are? All these things combine to kind of make it always less than the lumen output of what your eye is going to see. All right, so how do we measure that? I mentioned that one of the keys to light is being able to measure it. Well, there's that little black box there you're looking at that's called a foot candle meter. So as you can see, it's got a little scale on there telling you how many lumens or how many foot candles are it's seeing. The little white dome there, that is what is actually measuring the light. That's usually on these foot candle meters detachable. For instance, if you want to put it on a shelf or put it on a wall or put it away from where you are, and then it'll talk wirelessly back to the bottom part of the controller and tell you how many foot candles. Now, the one additional caveat is that there's, as you probably know, two different measuring criteria in the world. There's the imperial scale, which US is probably about the only major company that uses anymore. We're using gallons and foot can, what am I talking about? Feet and inches, and everybody else is using the the metric system. So in the United States, if you're looking at any information on fixtures made in the United States, you're going to see foot candles as the amount of light and also lumens, the amount of light that are produced by those fixtures. Now, when you move over to Europe, and if you're looking at something European, they have what they call lux. So as a rough guideline, I always divide by 10. So for instance, 15 foot candles in the United States is similar to 150 lux in Europe. So if you see some tables or anything like the one represented here, if you divide those by 10 or 11, you're going to get the US standard of foot candles. Now notice that this is by the Illuminating Engineering Society. So if you are an architect or you are an interior designer, architects have AIA, interior designers have the ASID or IDCEC if you're commercial. There's different organizations. Lighting designers typically will be represented by the Illuminating Engineering Society, which is the organization that keeps all the database on lighting. And they publish a handbook, very complex, very technical. I recommend anyone get it. But in there are certain pages that are devoted to how much light you need, or they suggest for different applications. So with foot candles, residentially, there's no requirements, but if you're working on commercial installations for like parking lots, you need a certain minimum foot candles, it's in code. You have to meet these standards for safety of the occupants. Same with hallways, same with, movie theater lighting and that kind of stuff. There's a certain level of light that is required, and that is measured with a foot candle meter, and those tables can be found on what each municipality, which each country, it varies by where you're at in the world on what they require. All right, the final thing, and this is the final technical thing, and then we'll get more into how to use lighting, is when you're looking at light fixture cut sheets, be wary of what the light source in there produces as compared to what the fixture produces. So they may be using, for example, a 1,000 lumen LED in there, But by the time they take that LED and put it in the fixture with this metal housing, with lenses, with this mixing chamber, you're always going to get less light put out. There's always a loss in there. So for example, this lumen output here of 1,000 lumens on the LED, once it's built into a recessed downlight or built into a wall sconce or whatever fixture that you're looking at, what you really want to know is the delivered lumen output. So that is, the light is actually coming out of that fixture after it's gone through all the different optics, chambers, metal reflectors, or whatever else is in that fixture. So the key there, and this is where some less savvy companies will try to fool you with the lumen output, is they'll say we're using 1,000 lumen LED, but what you really want to know is, well, after it leaves that fixture, how much light is there left? So you want to look at the delivered lumen output of that fixture. So let's take an example. Here's an example of a cut sheet you'll get from a typical manufacturer. It's obviously a downlight. You can see in the picture up there, at least on my right-hand side, you've got the choice of like a trimless and a trimmed. One has a flange, one doesn't have a flange. And then you also have the pinhole where they make the opening even smaller. And if you look over on at least my left side, you've got a table or a chart. And we're showing that that fixture looks like it's available in a 9-watt LED, an 18-watt LED. Notice the 9-watt, for instance, with we'll just start with the first one, a 15-degree beam angle. It's going to put out 650 lumens. And when you double that to an 18-watt, you don't actually double the lumen value. That would be then 1,300. But at an 18-watt, you're dealing with 1,046 lumens. I think I have a pointer here. Let me try and get it. Oh yeah, good. So this is not double that. Even though we doubled the wattage, we didn't double the lumen output. The other thing very key to notice when you're working with light fixtures is this, you could argue, is more attractive than this. It's smaller, more petite, less ceiling acme. But the minute you start hanging things below a light, you start cutting the amount of light coming out of that. So the multiplier here is a 0.57, all right? So that means you're going to lose 40% of the light output of this to go to these pinholes. So that's a good concept to keep in the back of your mind, because we'll talk about different louvers and lenses as we go further in this presentation. But everything you add between the light source and the human eye is going to degrade or lower the amount of lumen output that fixture is putting out here. Oh, having trouble with my PowerPoint. I'm trying to move to the next slide. Yep, there we go. All right, back. All right, as I mentioned, we're going to leave the technical arena for a bit and talk about contrast. It's kind of the yin and yang. For the human eye to perceive objects in space, there needs to be contrast. I'm probably sure you've seen different movies or that where they show somebody like going up to heaven and then they're in this white cloud where nothing's visible. There's also, on the more personal side, like Kobe's pilot was assumed to have lost his way, or possibly by the heavy cloud cover in that day when he crashed. You need to have a differentiation between white and dark for the human eye to discern what's out there. So when I put this picture up in front of you, I bet everybody's attention was drawn to that square downlight. Maybe a few of you have looked at the little ridges on the wall there. Maybe if you're in a tile business or something, you looked at the floor, but by and large, everybody was attention was drawn immediately to that downlight. Your human eye is drawn, basically any animal's eye, to be honest with you, is drawn to the brightest spot, in their horizon or vision initially. Nobody was looking up to the top left or the top right or the bottom left or the bottom right. I mean, when this picture was put up, I'm sure you were instantly galvanized to look at the front of that. So that's a huge key for you if you're an architect or designer, a lighting designer. If you want to draw the people's attention in the space or in the room you're at, the best and easiest way to do that is make that the brightest spot in that horizon. All right, so let's talk about contrast. It's the ratio between the dark and the light. So if you're looking at right here, is we've got a nice sculpture, all right, and we've got two different contrast levels to look at. We've got the one on the left, which is a 5-to-1 ratio. So that means if there's 10 foot candles of light in the background, the amount of light hitting that surface is 50. On the other side, you've got a 3-to-1. Now, if you notice back to the 5-to-1, it's more dramatic. Those shadows are more noticeable. The little impurities in the, I don't know if that's, I don't really know what it is, whether it's bone or marble or something like that. I mean, you see those, it's very dramatic. Now, in a residence, it's very difficult to get a 5-to-1 ratio, right? Because you have to have a pretty dark background, which doesn't lend itself to a lot of residential applications. But if you're in a museum or a hotel lobby or something where you really want dramatic impact, the more you can have that differentiation between the thing you want to emphasize and its background, the more it's going to pop. So a 5-to-1 ratio, great. You may want to use that even in a residence. If, for instance, you have a dedicated button that's highlighting the artwork or the sculpture in that space. But more often you may just have like an entertain, or you may have a setting for relax, and then like a 3-to-1 ratio like the one on the other side is probably more desirable because you do have more background illumination so you can get around that space. But the point here is if you want to draw out something architecturally important in the room, granite countertop or an interesting architectural feature, light it up. Same if you're an interior designer, if you've got a painting, you've got a beautiful sofa or some furnishings you want to have draw attention to, light it up. In addition to putting more light on an object, another way you can really change the emphasis in a space is by coming from different directions. But at first glance, to me, this looks like 6 different items. It's actually the same one being lit from different perspectives. Now here's where I want to plug, getting a serious professional lighting designer involved in any project where you're dealing with a homeowner or a client or a commercial one who wants true lighting to be artwork, because these guys know this information. They will be able to reproduce it on your projects and have these kind of, gorgeous things. The purpose of this presentation is just kind of to sensitize you that there are these options. And when you have a client that you sense is going to need that kind of involvement, that kind of expertise, then that's when you go out and hire a lighting designer to help you. You can imagine I'm just going to pick 2 I really like, the second and the third one, the side light and the back light. If you had, for instance, on a lighting system to transition between those 2 over a 3 or a 4 minute space, even subtly, it's always going to create a different mood. Every time you look up, that object what you're lighting is going to just appear a little bit different. And those can create some really memorable and dramatic spaces. All right, talking more about the fixtures themselves, there's 2 different ways to light a room. You have the direct approach and the indirect. So direct approach means the light is shining straight down on the object you're trying to illuminate. This is typically the less costly way to do it. Why? Because there's less light loss. The light is coming basically straight out of the fixture onto the object you're trying to light. But I'll argue, in my experience, and I've been doing it for a lot of years, rooms are much more comfortable, in my opinion, when they have the indirect approach, kind of like sunlight, kind of like what we're used to, where you're not looking directly at the light. And that's accomplished by, in the indirect fixture, shooting the light up. So it's going to hit the ceiling, hit the walls. It's going to, come at you more naturally, more ergonomically, I would say. The difficulty with that is you need to pump, to get the same amount of light on that floor, you need to pump a lot more light out of an indirect light source than you do a direct one. So budget is the key. Then you go with direct. If it's more functionality, making it more comfortable, more friendly, then typically indirects people appreciate better. It's a much softer, diffused, comfortable lighting style or approach. but it is going to cost more. You're going to need more fixtures. You're going to need more lumens to get that same effect.
Hey, Mark, we did
All
have
right.
one question.
Sure.
I'm sorry to interrupt. On the previous slide or 2 slides back where you were having the different angles of light, I believe on the artwork,
Yes.
is that done with dimming, do you know, or is that done with just different positions of light in that case?
My understanding is the same amount of light on all of them is just coming from different angles. So there is, it's the same quantity of light just coming from a different position.
Awesome, thank you.
So, all right, back to layers of light. Now this is the key if you're not a lighting designer. This is what separates, in my opinion, an architect or a layman from somebody who has put thought into it. And that's if you're looking at any space or any room, you should have more than one light switch or one light group controlling that space. The ability to mingle these three, emphasize some, bring them up, bring them down is what adds the vitality, adds the control, adds the drama to the room. So if you're looking, if you want to advance your expertise, take a look at each room and train yourself to think about these 3 types of light that are needed for that room. The first one is what we call general illumination or ambient lighting. That is just the amount of light that you need to navigate that space effectively without tripping over sofas or, desks. It's the amount of light that makes it so that you can walk into that space, see everything, and just see it normally. From there, the second one is accent lighting. So every single room, I don't care what it is, maybe a broom closet is an exception or something, but there is something that is more architecturally or designer pleasing than other things in the room. Highlight those objects. So we're showing an art room here, but if that were a living room or something, find a, the fireplace, or find interesting molding or something that you want to emphasize in that room. And again, as we talked about the contrast level, put more light on that particular object to draw it out. And then the rooms usually have a task, right? So the kitchen is for cooking. The TV room is for watching TVs. So you want to make sure you have enough light on the surface to accomplish that task. So in the kitchen, you want lots of illumination on the countertop. So you're cutting, you're dicing, you're mixing, you've got plenty of light there. And the TV room is actually kind of the opposite. You want to remove light so you don't have glare on the TV screen. In a reading room, you want enough light to read. So whatever that room's purpose is, make sure you have the light on hand to accomplish whatever task is taking place in that spot. So if you analyze every room in your project and say, all right, how much light do I need just for general illumination? What are the architecturally or interior design aspects in that room that I want to highlight or illuminate? And then what's the basic activity in that room? Let's make sure we have enough light, going on so they can accomplish those goals. If you look at each room and ask yourself those 3 questions, you're going to develop a good lighting design. So here's where the quiz starts. So you've got like 4 or 5 different slides here where I'm going to ask you, what do you see in the space? Is there accent light? Is there task lighting? Is there just general ambient light? So I'm going to pause for like 5 or 10 seconds on each one, and then we'll show you the answers, or at least what Lutron thinks the answers are for these questions. So here's the first one. This is kind of a low budget art studio. Where's the light coming from and what are they using? So we'll go to the answer on the first one. Right here, if you look in the ceiling, you really got general and accent lighting going on. The general lighting is the lights that are pointed on the floor, right? It's enough light to get into that space so you're not tripping over the little bench there. And then the accent lighting, you can see it popping on the pictures. So they've got track lights there aimed at the pictures, and you can see the kind of circles around the pictures where they're highlighting each of the pictures. All right, there's really no task lighting. There's no activity going on other than basically sitting in there and admiring the light fixtures. Notice also, and we'll talk about this further in the presentation, on beam angles. So the ones that are highlighting the light fixtures on the wall have a tighter beam angle. The ones highlighting the floor have a broader beam angle because you're just looking to get light, around that space. Here's the second one. So I'll pause a couple seconds for you guys to take a look at it and try and analyze what you think you see. All right, here's the answer for that one. Pretty much all general lighting, right? There's no fixtures there highlighting, individual architectural features. You've just got in those pendants a general A lamp sending out light. This looks to me like it's some kind of architect's office. Also notice the light coming in from the window, right? I mean, sunlight is something you definitely need to consider, and in almost every case it's a general light. It's very difficult to use sunlight to be a task light or to be an accent light. You really need a lot of planning to do that, and then the sun's a variable based on time of day and weather. So you can't always count on sunlight to be there when you want it. Sometimes it's there with too much light than you want. All right, next one. This is a residential space. This is a home in Los Angeles. It's actually over by Loyola Marymount. I'll give you a couple seconds to consider your thoughts and your answers on this. All right, let's move to the answer. So you definitely have some general lighting. So the downlights in the space in the kitchen area, definitely providing that general ambient light so that you can walk and navigate that space as needed. You definitely have some task lighting. So the pendants above the the counters. So whether you're cooking there or whether you're eating there, it looks, in my opinion, that's kind of the eating space of this house here. You could make an argument that the light over the flowers is an accent light, especially if that light in that single pendant there was color changing, where you could emphasize the pinks and greens and oranges. That could be considered an accent light if you're able to control it independently. But, that's the analysis of that room. How about here? So another residential example. Again, I'll give you a few seconds to take a look at it and think. All right, Simon says on this one, first of all, accent. So for sure, we have some downlights there above the, looks like a crown on the other side. I'm not sure if it's a flowers or something like that over there. I'm gonna use my pen again, I always forget to use that. So these are accent lights. And that's over the flowers. You have some general lamps, so ambient lighting. I hear somebody talking in the background. So in this table lamp here, we have some task lighting. So if you're reading or sitting there, you can do that. Now, it doesn't say there's any ambient or general lighting in here, but I would argue that both the fireplace as well as the light coming in from outdoor would qualify to me as ambient lighting. This one's controllable. You can turn this on or off. Again, the sunlight is dependent upon the time of day, and again, whether it's a cloudy or a bright day and that kind of thing.
Looks like Electric was a little better for that project.
Hey guys, one of the folks from Western who's logged in as me, one of the folks that's logged in as me on Western, you are unmuted. I don't know, I can't tell who that is, unfortunately. So either possibly Dejana or Jen Yorgi.
All right, gentlemen. Here's, I believe, the last one. So I know this one. This is a job in Austin, Texas. It's a sushi restaurant. Very nicely done. So I'll give you a few seconds to think about what you see here. All right, so let's reveal what we think anyways. First of all, you have some general lighting. So in those pendants, the red and white pendants that are the first thing you see, that's got an A lamp in there. So that's providing, just general illumination to get you around the space. You have some par lamps above the individual tables there on the wall. So that's a task light, right? So it's illuminating, you know, you're eating. And then you've got this really cool picture of this, looks like sea dragon or something, kind of lit. Well, it's probably a color changing LED this because of the bluish, giving you a kind of a water or a kind of a midnight feel to it. So very, very well done architecturally lighting here. So you've got a combination of both general task and ambient lighting, accent lighting in that space. Okay, the next concept we want to look at is the difference between what we call linear and point sources. So your linear sources are fluorescent tubes, they're tape light, they're neon, they're cold cathode, they're like they sound, they're lights that, you know, have a linear or a length to them. Point sources are generally your MR16s, your downlights, they're just one individual spot that illuminates the space. So in the top two pictures here, we're looking at a linear source. The one on the left, this is actually the same room with the same fixture. The one on the left, the light is pointed up into the cove. So we're getting that indirect lighting. So the light is bouncing around that cove and then coming down. So you get a nice soft kind of heavenly feel out of that light. The one next to it is that same source pointed down. How do I know that? Well, you can actually see on the floor there the light. So that's a kind of grazing the wall, but gives you a whole different feel just by changing the fixture's position on there. The second row down, then you were showing, you know, purely down lighting, purely point source lighting. So you've got looks like 9 or 10 down lights in the one side. You can tell they're pointed down because you have the scallops on the wall, which in a lot of cases is not desirable because it draws attention away from the room. You really don't want to see the lights or the effect of the lighting. You really want to highlight different objects. And then you look at the one with the columns on there. I mean, that's, in my opinion, that's beautiful. So those are dramatically lit up. They have the pools of light at the bottom of the columns. You can see the reflections off of them. You know, that's adjustable lights shining there. And then on the bottom, just showing when you have limitless combinations when you mix both linear and point source lighting. So the one on the left, everything's lit up. The one on the right, it looks like the linears have been turned off and you're getting the primary light from the downlights in there. So these are two different styles of light fixtures that you can use to help you illuminate your space. All right, another important concept here, the difference of beams, right? So when you look at a fixture, an architectural fixture, it will generally have a beam angle. And you need to understand what that means. So directly under the light fixture is the most intense position. So you're going to get 100% intensity directly under the light. The beam angle is when you move left or right from that, where does the intensity drop to 50% from the maximum right under it? All right. The other angle there, you generally won't see this in fixture manufacturer spec sheets, but the field angle is where that drops down to 10%. But you'll pretty much always see in a good architectural cut sheet what the beam angle is. So the tighter the beam angle, the more power driven into a smaller space. The wider percentage on the beam angle, you're going to get a wider area of light, but it's not going to be intense because it's distributed over a much larger area. So narrow beams, as it says on the bottom of the note, they're ideal for high ceilings, or you want to highlight very small pieces of artwork. Wider beams are better for general illumination in a room or a hallway. All right, here's how to kind of use this information. So a lot of manufacturers will put these kind of tables in their products. So you're looking at the top where the fixture is, and then you've got under the cone there, how many foot candles you're going to get: 6-foot ceiling, 8-foot ceiling, 10-foot, 12-foot, 14-foot, as you see. So notice, for instance, it's not linear. So at a 6-foot ceiling, you're going to have 211 foot candles from this fixture. But if you go to a 12-foot, you'd probably in your head think, well, that should be half. It's not, it's 53. So it's basically a quarter. So the farther away the light is, it depreciates pretty rapidly. And these kind of tables from manufacturers will tell you how much light depreciation you're going to lose as you get farther away, and also how large the beam pattern on the floor will be. So notice at the 6 foot, we've got basically 1.5 foot beam diameter. When we drop down to that 12-foot one, we're over 3 feet of a beam diameter. So important, these will tell you how much power of light you're going to get on the surface, and then how big the pattern is going to be. That will tell you, where you need to mount that next fixture. So just to show you how these beam patterns will change that, what we have here are 2 different spotlights. If you look, each one of them are 900 lumens. So I'm having trouble with the pointer since I'm not going to use it, because the last couple of times I've done that, the slide advance has been an issue. But if you look next to the top red and blue screen, you're going to see the output is 900 lumens on both of these lamps. But then you delve down, and I've highlighted we're at a 10-foot ceiling on both of them. With the 10-degree spot, I've got 104-foot candles and a 1.8-foot spread on the floor, versus when I go to a 40% beam angle, all right, I've only got 13-foot candles. So basically, 12 or 13% of the other one, but my, area of coverage is much wider. I've got basically 7.25 feet of a light on that floor. So you use these, you probably use like that 40-degree wide for that ambient light. And then if you have some architecturally special in that space, you'd switch over to that 10% spotlight, that's where you can have that contrast ratio, where you're really pumping up the light on that artwork or that vase or sculpture that you want to emphasize. So here's a much more elaborate museum than the last one we looked at. So this looks like it's obviously highlighting some religious artwork. And notice how they've effectively used that same concept we just talked about. So there's an arrow for the 40-degree wide floods. That's a general illumination around the floor. So again, you're not crashing into things. But then you're using the 10-degree spotlights to highlight the individual, I don't know if they're saints or whoever, or whatever objects they're highlighting. It's really making those items pop, and it gives the room a very, interesting look. Your eyes are immediately drawn to the stained glass or the different sculptures that you see, or it looks like you've got some artwork from, written artwork or painted artwork in the back, maybe some Bibles or that kind of thing. All right, so getting back, when you need expertise that is beyond your ability, go to a professional lighting designer, because they have tools like you see here. There's a couple, software packages out there, Dialux, AGI, that will produce these kind of drawings. So you put in what your furniture is, you put in the ceiling height, you put in the fixture and how many lumens and how far away it is, and then you're going to be able to accurately represent what you're going to get. So we're going to see in this case, we're highlighting the table. It's got a higher foot candle reading, like in the 50-degree range, than the rest of the seating areas, which are your aqua and blues, which look to be in the 13 to 20 foot candle range. So again, we're emphasizing the table, and whatever's on it is going to have that extra emphasis and draw attention to it. Also notice again on the third bullet point down there that at the IES, they do recommend, high, medium, and low foot candle levels for dining areas, reading areas, kitchen countertops. They do have these for residential as well. All right, here tends to be one of the points that I think laymen need a lot of help on, and that's when you're using fixtures on the ceiling to highlight artwork or paintings, or you've got a group of photographs on the wall. How do you position those? Well, there's not a lot of universal rules, but one of the ones I will kind of say is universal is you're going to have multiple fixtures highlighting on a wall, and you want it to be even. Whatever your distance from the wall should be the same as the distance between the fixtures. So if it's 3 foot back, it needs to be 3 foot between the next fixture. If you don't, you're going to have scallops, and some lighting designers use that and break that rule to great effect. But if you're not new, don't break the rules before you learn the rules. So what we're showing here is the example where on a 3 foot by 3 foot spacing, it looks like you have some hot spots there, where if the fixture is moved back to 4 foot back and 4 foot between spacings, you get a much more even flow. You know, you want a constant light band across those paintings. Here's another example, the one, I'm going to go back to the previous one. This is with a 40-degree flood. This is with a 60. Notice the 3 by 3, I consider that pretty good, but the 4 by 4 is excellent. There's almost no differentiation between those. Notice also when you bring it back a little further, you expand on the edges, you're getting a little more light coverage, you know, left to right than you do on the 3 by 3 space. And you can do the same thing with linear lights. So this is I know this fixture personally. It's a very powerful fixture that's a 1 foot fixture, but it actually has 6 different LEDs in there. It produces a ton of light. So, you know, whether you have a 3 foot or a 4 foot setback, the only real difference is the 4 foot comes down a little farther, goes out a little wider, but you're getting a constant, you know, nice burst of light over that artwork. It's really, as you can see from the red, it's really going to make that area pop as a differential to other light in the space. So how do you figure this? Well, you have to take your light source and first of all, make sure it's adjustable. You need to make sure how, you know, far from the ceiling it is. Again, the farther away, the more lumens you need out of it. And then what are you trying to illuminate? You know, men are typically taller than women, so we recommend, you know, just under about 5 foot as the typical eye, you know, where your eyes are, like I think it's like 410 or something I usually recommend, and that, you know, that is kind of the good position for both men and women. So that's right where you want your artwork to be if you want it at eye level, and then make sure your fixture can hit that based on the adjustability and based on the amount of lumens. Again, you want to have that 3-to-1 or 5-to-1 ratio on the object you're trying to light to make sure that it really pops in that space. And there's an example of like a Nordstrom's or you know, some kind of department store. The biggest problem I see with people who are new to this is putting the fixture much too close to the wall. So there's a big difference whether the fixture is 6 inches away from the wall or 1 foot. Again, look at your beam patterns there on the left here. So if that's the piece of artwork, I would kind of argue this is not a good solution. So the 10-degree beam pattern is not quite covering the art. The 25-degree beam pattern is, in my opinion, too big. I would probably look for something that had like a 15. So if that were a 15-degree beam spread on that track fixture or downlight, it would cover the art, you know, almost perfectly. Cove lighting, another specialty that you can do both, again, commercially and residentially. To again, that's another example of a use of the indirect light, bouncing the light down to the surface. So here we have a showroom. The key that you see in the drawing there is you've got a little flap there that hides the light source, so you never want to actually see the light source, you just want to see the light bouncing around it. And also notice there's a note at the ceiling that it needs to be matte white. So the lighting designer who's ever specified this, you know, knows the value of having a white surface to reflect the light back into the space. Another example of the floating cloud, I always think these are tremendous. It makes it look like that center ceiling is almost hanging on its own. But again, you got a cove all the way around, the lamp source is hidden, and you're reflecting the light, you know, back into the room. Provides a really dramatic effect, both residentially and commercially. Little note here on the height of the fixtures. So the closer the light is to the person, most people feel that a little more intimate. I mean, there's a reason when you go into a restaurant, they have the little personal candles there. It just makes it feel closer, more dynamic, more personal. And then as the light gets higher and higher, it tends to get more general, right? When you go to an auditorium, the light's way up there high. When you go to your dining room, you probably have a chandelier close to the table again, or next to your bed, the little desk lamp that you have. So the closer the light is to the person, again, it's all perceptive, but most people think it's more intimate, more personal when the light is closer to the being himself. And to get a little note here that if you have high ceilings, we recommend generally to get away from linear lighting. You're probably going to need a point source, with a narrow focus and a lot of lumens, because as you saw earlier, the higher the ceiling gets, the less light gets to the floor and it drops off pretty dramatically. So if you're into 12-foot, 16 or 20-foot ceilings and you need to punch a lot of light on the floor, you're probably looking at a downlight with a lot of lumen package and a narrow beam to get that light to where it needs to be. Glare. So glare is when you have too much light, right? As we said, there's a reason we don't have light, eyes on the top of our heads, because it would hurt when you're near the sun. So there are devices out there that can stop that viewing angle. So on downlights, for instance, you want to see a 40-degree cutoff. That means when you're in the room, you pretty much have to be directly under that light to see the light sources. It's not so bad if you see the light bouncing off the wall of the fixture, that's okay, but you don't want to look up into the light itself. Same thing with track lights. So you see there's snoots, there's louvers. These are kind of things that can funnel that light tightly, so you don't see the glare. It also helps, highlight that object so that the light is just smacking that. Once again, I warn you, when you start adding these snoots and baffles, you're cutting the amount of light coming out of that fixture. But if you're trying to do glare control or trying to provide a lot of contrast, these can be helpful items to attach to the fixtures. All right, we're getting near the end here. Let's talk about color temperature. All right, everybody thinks white light. What is white light? Well, typically what the sun produces, right? But if you think about that, that changes dramatically over the course of the day. So in the morning, you get those amber hues as the light's first coming up, kind of orangey. And then toward the middle of the day, you've got bright white, intense, almost blue light. And then as the evening comes along, you're back into those, ambers and beautiful sunsets. So, the importance of that is that white light is not the same to all people. So what the lighting people, the IES, have developed is this Kelvin scale. Now, how that was derived is they take a piece of black iron, they stick it in the kiln, and the hotter it gets, they measure the light at each temperature. So if you think about it, if you've ever done that or looked at a stove when you start it up, when it first starts to get hot, it's kind of oranges, and then it gets hotter and hotter, it gets into white. And if you've ever seen, for instance, like magnesium burn, it actually burns blue, it's so hot. So, how I always think is the lower number Kelvin, the redder the light. So the diagram you're looking at here is the chromaticity diagram. That's all the colors that can be seen by the human eye. And then that little curve in the center of it is the white light curve. That's the lighting that the sun can reproduce. So you see it's very orange on one area, and then it moves to the blue. So the orange area, again, is sunrise. The more blue would be like noon at the Arctic Circle. We show a room there where it's nice if your lighting is able to replicate what's happening outside. So you could have 2700 for a relaxing meeting with your wife or girlfriend there, 3500 for middle of the day, and then maybe a higher, more intense, whiter light at 4000 Kelvin when you're cooking or dicing or chopping. It'd be wonderful to have lighting control that, or lights that where you're able to select the light or mimic what's happening outside. A couple final things to think of: CRI, color rendering index. So how pure is the color? Again, the gold standard here is the noonday sun. So does red look red, orange look orange? A perfect score would be 100. So the higher that number, obviously if you were Vaughn's or Ralph's and you're selling tomatoes here, you're going to sell more with the 90 plus CRI than you're going to have with the 80, because those, it's just more vivid, more pop, more delicious those tomatoes look. So how is CRI determined? Well, there's 14 different colors they measure. The first 8 that you see up there, the Easter egg colors, that's what CRI actually measures. You probably also want to look at the red score, because red is good for skin tones, good for food rendering. So look at the CRI, and also especially red. California's Title 24 has requirements that these have to meet for lamps and fixtures to be sold in the United States. Final thing here is when you're working with different colors, there's an idea of macadam ellipse. So everything within those little circles you see is indiscernible to the human eye. So one macadam ellipse, when people make fixtures, means every one of those fixtures, the difference between them is indiscernible. When you step outside of that, then you're going to see a little bit fixture by fixture differentiation. So if you're looking at a fixture that you're thinking about using on the job, if it has a one macadam ellipse, that guarantees that right out of the box, you're not going to be able to see any difference between the fixtures. When you get 2, 3, or 4 macadam ellipse away, then you're going to begin to see some fixture by fixture differentiation. Now, the key to that is the best time you're ever going to see it is right out of the box. So as fixtures age and they're used, that difference becomes greater as the LEDs in there, wear down and degrade. And I believe this is the last slide on the presentation, but don't overlook the use of color in space. So as LEDs become, more powerful, smarter, more intense year by year, there's more and more ability to have that red, green, blue, or red, green, blue and white LEDs, or red, green, blue and amber LEDs. You'll see this, indicated on there. That's then going to give you the ability to have color as you need it. So green for St. Patrick's Day, pink for Valentine's Day, red, white, and blue for 4th of July. Maybe a corporate client's coming in here and their corporate color is purple. You can change that room, you can highlight it, you can create a lot of fun, a lot of drama. You don't do this all the time, but it's nice since you have those different colors, in those fixtures to be able to pull them out and use them as you see fit. So I think that's the end of the presentation. Almost exactly on time, which is rare for me. A just quick review of what we covered. Again, I consider this one of our best because it really covers a lot of ground in a short amount of time period. But we covered the terminology of lighting, lumens, foot candles. We covered ideas on the fixtures, on where to place them, the adjustability of fixtures, different beam angles, macadam ellipse, CRI. And then we covered, lighting ideas like layers of light, emphasizing contrast. You want higher differences between things you want to emphasize in the background information, positioning, where the light's going to be, the front, the side, the back, all that kind of information. So this presentation is available in a PDF form. I'd be happy to share it with you. In fact, I'll give it to the good people at Western, and if anyone is interested in getting a copy of it, feel free to ask them for it, and we'll be happy to send that out. So Jim, if you're still on, were there any final questions before we sign off here?
I'm looking. I don't see any questions. I'll give it a minute. We will include this presentation with a thank you follow-up email. So again, Mark, really appreciate you taking the time to present this today. I know I learned a few things I didn't know. And to everyone who was able to attend, really appreciate you guys being on with us. And again, if there's anything we can do to help you, let us know. Stay safe out there for sure.
Yeah. Final note from me, again, if you're doing AIA or IDC EC learning credits, make sure you get us that information, name, company, your code number, and we'll enter all that information for you. All right. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.